Welcome back, everyone, to the deep dive. This time, we're going to be taking a deep dive into performance management.
Ooh, exciting.
It is exciting. Most people think of performance management as like a chore,
Yeah,
both for the employees and managers.
right.
But when it's done right, it can really make a big difference to how successful an organization is.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we've got some fascinating research that we're going to be looking at from Herman
A Gwyneth?
Aquinas,
Like the beer?
like the beer,
Like the beer?
and Charles A. Pierce.
Okay.
This was published in the Journal of Organizational Behavior back in 2008.
Wow, so almost 20 years ago.
I know.
It's amazing how relevant this stuff still is today, even though the workplace has changed so much.
I know. It's really interesting.
What really stood out to me was how they emphasized that performance management.
Yeah.
It's not the same as performance appraisal.
Okay, can you break that down for us? Because I think a lot of people use those terms interchangeably.
Yeah, for sure. So think of an appraisal as like that yearly meeting you have with your boss,
Right.
where get a pat on the back or maybe a little bit of a nudge about some things you can improve on. It's basically like a snapshot,
Yeah.
just a one-time thing. But performance management is more like a cycle.
Okay.
It's about planning, working towards goals, getting feedback along the way, reviewing how things are going, and then using that to plan for like the next cycle.
So it's more like a coach working with an athlete throughout the whole season,
Exactly.
rather than just like judging them at the final game.
Yeah, exactly.
I like that analogy.
Yeah. Aquinas and Pierce, they break it down into like 6 stages. We don't need to get into all the details. But like the main idea is that it starts with everyone being on the same page about the organization's goals,
Yeah.
and the specific skills that are needed for the job.
Got it.
And then the managers and the employees, they work together to set clear targets and make a plan for how the employee can develop their skills.
So it's much more collaborative than just like you messed up here and you messed up there.
Right. It's about working together from the very beginning.
I like that.
Yeah, and it doesn't stop there.
Okay.
So then the employee focuses on those targets, they get feedback and support from their manager along the way,
Yeah.
and then they both assess how things are going.
So it's not just the manager's judgment. It's like the employee's involved too.
Exactly. The employee is actively involved in evaluating how things are going.
Okay, so that constant communication is really key.
It is. It is. And then you have like the formal review where
Yeah.
you discuss those assessments,
Uh-huh.
share feedback, identify areas for improvement, all that stuff.
Okay.
But here's the thing. This isn't the end.
Oh, so it's not just like, see you next year, same time, same place.
No. The final stage is about using what you learn to set new goals
Okay.
and adjust the plan for the next cycle.
Okay.
So it's about continuous improvement, always getting better.
So this all sounds great in theory, but like, does it actually work?
Well, Aquinas and Pierce, they cite some pretty impressive statistics.
Oh.
Organizations that have these formal performance management systems, they're 51% more likely to outperform others financially
Wow.
and 41% more likely to excel in other areas too,
Like what?
like customer satisfaction and employee retention, which are both really important.
So it sounds like these companies are winning on all fronts.
It seems that way, yeah.
That's impressive.
Yeah, they even highlighted this example of Merrill Lynch.
Okay.
They actually moved from like a yearly appraisal system to this continuous performance management system that we've been talking about,
Okay.
and they saw a lot of success.
What did they do differently? Was it just about having more frequent conversations?
It was more than that. They really emphasized ongoing feedback and coaching.
Okay.
So there were regular check-ins between managers and employees.
Uh-huh.
And then they also added these like mid-year feedback sessions
Right.
and made sure that the end of their reviews involved feedback from multiple sources, not just like the direct manager.
Got it.
And every employee also had an individual development plan.
So it was like a much more holistic
Yes.
and personalized
Yeah.
approach.
Exactly.
But if these systems are so great, like, why doesn't everyone do it this way? You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question.
Right. It's like, if it's so good, why isn't everybody doing it?
Exactly. And that's what we'll be talking about next time on the Deep Dive.
All right. See you next time.
Bye. It's funny because Aquinas and Pierce actually talk about that. They point out that even when companies have these systems in place, they don't always work the way they're supposed to.
Really?
Yeah, in fact, they cite this survey from Australia where less than 20% of employees felt like their performance reviews actually helped them improve.
Wow. That's pretty low.
It is. And that's where organizational behavior comes in.
Organizational behavior.
Yeah, OB for short. Aquinas and Pierce, they argue that we need to understand, like, The human element.
Right.
The psychology of how people actually work within organizations if we want to make these systems effective.
So it's not just about having a system, it's about how people interact with it.
Exactly.
Got it.
So they highlight 5 key areas of OB research that can help us understand this better.
Okay.
And one of the biggest ones is trust.
Trust, yeah.
Employees need to trust that the system is fair,
Right.
that their feedback will be taken seriously,
Mm-hmm.
and that it'll actually benefit them in the long run.
Okay.
Managers also need to trust that the employees will actually use the feedback to improve.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then the organization as a whole needs to trust that the system is actually serving its purpose.
I could see how that could be a challenge, especially these days when companies are constantly restructuring and downsizing and
Yeah.
people just feel uncertain about their future.
Absolutely. And that's something that researchers are still exploring. Like, how do you build that trust when everything feels so unstable?
Yeah, good question.
It definitely suggests that the organizational culture, how leaders communicate, and the actions they take play a huge role in shaping that trust.
So it's not just about the system itself, it's about the environment it's operating within.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly. And this also ties into another key OB area, social exchange.
Social exchange, what is that?
So think of it like this. Employees bring their skills and their effort to the table, right?
Right.
And in return, they expect fair compensation, they expect recognition, and they expect opportunities to grow.
So it's like a give and take.
It is. It's a two-way street.
Okay.
And a good performance management system should actually strengthen that exchange.
Right.
So it should be really clear, what each side is bringing to the table and what they can expect in return.
Makes sense.
Yeah. But things can get a bit tricky when you bring in personal relationships.
Oh, yeah.
Like when you have to give feedback to a close friend or manage performance within a team that's like having some conflict.
Oh, I can see how that would get really messy.
Yeah, for sure. So that's where having clear guidelines, proper training for supervisors, and open communication channels becomes super important.
So, again, good communication is key.
Absolutely. And that's another area where OB research can help a lot.
Okay.
We need to understand how different communication styles, the channels that we use, and even like the specific techniques impact how effective these systems are.
So it's not just about what you say, it's how you say it.
Exactly. And sometimes it's even about what you don't say.
Interesting.
Yeah. So performance management, it also involves negotiation.
Negotiation.
Yeah. Like setting goals, working out development plans, making decisions about rewards.
Okay.
It's about finding that sweet spot that works for both the individual and the organization.
So you need good communication skills, you need to be a good listener, and you need to be willing to compromise.
Exactly. It's all about finding solutions that benefit everyone involved.
It sounds like this research from McGuinness and Porce is still incredibly relevant even today.
It really is, yeah.
What would you say is like their most important takeaway for our listeners?
Well, I think they really remind us that performance management isn't just about evaluating employees.
Right.
It's about fostering their growth and development and making sure that their goals are aligned with the organization's goals.
Mm.
It's about creating a culture of continuous improvement.
Yeah.
And recognizing that the human element, the way we interact and communicate, is really at the heart of making these systems work.
I like that. That's a great point.
Yeah.
And before we wrap up this part of the deep dive, we wanted to leave you with a final thought to ponder.
Okay.
Given that the way we work is constantly changing,
Mhm.
with things like remote work and flexible schedules and the gig economy becoming more common,
Right.
how can performance management adapt to keep pace with all of that?
Well, I think it's a really good question. Um, I think the traditional models of performance management, the ones that are just focused on measuring like how much someone produces,
Yeah.
they might not be enough anymore.
So it's not just about hitting a certain sales target or writing a certain number of reports.
Right. We need to think about how to assess performance based on things like problem solving, adaptability,
Yeah.
and how much value someone brings to the table.
Yeah.
Those are skills that are super important in today's world.
Yeah, absolutely. It's about like fostering a mindset of continuous learning and innovation,
Yes.
not just checking boxes.
Exactly. And we also can't ignore technology.
Right.
Think about how things like data analytics could help us identify patterns in performance, provide more personalized feedback, and create development plans that are really tailored to each individual.
Yeah, that's really interesting. But with all this talk about data and systems, it's important to remember that we're still talking about people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, we need systems that are human-centered, that give people a sense of ownership over their growth and that make them feel like they belong and have a purpose.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point to remember. So as we wrap up this deep dive into performance management, what key takeaways should our listeners walk away with?
Well, first, I think it's important to remember that performance management is about so much more than just evaluating employees.
Yeah.
It's about creating a culture of continuous improvement where everyone can thrive.
Right.
And second, we have to remember that the human element is key.
Absolutely.
It's about building trust, communicating effectively, and recognizing the unique needs and aspirations of each person.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into performance management.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We hope it sparks some new ideas and giving you a fresh perspective on how to approach this, often misunderstood but incredibly important aspect of work.
It's been a great discussion.
We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.